President Forsyth mentioned, Winston Churchill indeed spoke here, and so did Mikhail Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher, among many other great leaders. So no pressure, and I'm not sweating at all under the road. Before I get into the main body of my speech, which really concerns the significant role of Westminster College in Winston Churchill coming to Missouri, and indeed the importance of the liberal arts education that you're about to embark upon, I want to tell you a personal story, so please indulge me. And this, I'm kind of doing this part off the cuff, so forgive me if I stumble a little bit. As President Forsyth kindly mentioned, I've spent many hours and days at the National Churchill Museum with Director Rob Havers and the other staff members going through the archives. And in one of my final visits, just before my manuscript submission deadline, I realized that one day wasn't going to get it done. It was a Friday, and it was the Friday before Halloween. And there was quite a lot going on campus, as you would expect. And in the hustle and bustle, I was kind of trying to figure out, can I get away with being a husband with two small kids? Yet another night away for research and writing purposes, so thought, well, better call Nicole and see if I can get that done. So I did that. Yeah, okay, I can just about get away with it. There's going to be there's some consequences, but we'll deal with that later. And so then she did remind me that it's usually best to actually book a hotel room or have somewhere to stay, or maybe just plan in advance really in any way when doing something like this in the city on your own. But I hadn't done that, of course. And so I remember hearing about a bed and breakfast where Margaret Thatcher supposedly stayed. So I thought, well, that can't be too far from campus. So I'm kind of wandering around, trying not to trip over pumpkins, this sort of thing. You know, it's Halloween, and looking around, and there's ghosts jumping out, and you know, it's getting a little scary. And I finally found a bed and breakfast, which is indeed not far from campus. But unfortunately, there was no room at the inn. Probably a very bad intentional pun. And luckily, I had met two students on my way over there who had pointed my way, and they kind of saw me walking back, you know, kind of bluntly, and realized that, as I said, there was indeed no room at the inn. And just out of the blue, one of them stuck out his hand and said, well, I'm David, and he introduced his friend and said, we live in one of the college-round houses just down the street. Would you be comfortable sleeping on a futon? It's like, well, it's a student house, a futon's usually better than what you would get as an unexpected guest. And they welcomed me into their house and cooked me a bang-up meal and also a nice omelette breakfast in the morning. And really, that says more about my experience here at Westminster and what you have to look forward to. That David, not knowing me from Adam, would welcome me into his house and cook me not one but two meals. That really says everything you need to know. But as they asked me to speak for 15 to 20 minutes, you're going to have to put up with a little bit more. So here we go. Now, as I mentioned, today does mark a special day for every student I see in the audience. Westminster College, as you'll have just seen from the ceremony, makes a really big deal out of Convocation, and for a reason. Because whether you're a freshman or a transfer student, it's the beginning of the next time you walk through those columns, you'll be a college grad. It's scary, isn't it? So what are you doing here? I asked myself the same question after my first college algebra class at another great small liberal arts school, Mid-American Nazarene University. And it's arguable that without my wife Nicole's tutoring, I might still be stuck there instead of speaking to you here today. But seriously, I'd like to think for a moment, I'd like us to consider together about why you chose a liberal arts education and what it means for you now and when you leave Westminster in 4 years. First, let's define what we're talking about when we refer to liberal arts. Merriam-Webster states that it means college or university studies as language, philosophy, literature, abstract science, intended to provide chiefly general knowledge and to develop general intellectual capacities as reason and judgment. So then, a broad range of subjects that improve your ability to think and to act. That sounds pretty good, doesn't it? I mean, it is Merriam-Webster. It's got to be definitive. But in 2013, with education costs continuing to rise, more on-campus and online choices than ever before, and an ever-changing job market, what is the true value of such an education? Why should someone, in this case you students, choose to commit 4 years of your life to studying here? Why should you do it at a place like Westminster? Well, to start answering these questions, I'd like to turn to a quote that I like somewhat better than the maybe definitive but somewhat lifeless dictionary definition, and one that comes from somebody who dedicated his life to students and their liberal arts education, President Frank Bullock McClure. In 1933, after being a student here, McClure became the school's youngest ever president and guided it through the choppy waters of the Great Depression and World War II, when all college-age men were eligible for the draft and enrollment suffered a serious hit. It's arguable that it was only due to McClure's ingenuity in securing a naval training school program here that the college is even still in existence. But what McClure is best known for is the lecture series he oversaw here at Westminster, bringing speakers such as J. Edgar Hoover, New York Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, and eventually Winston Churchill here. Anyway, enough of the history lesson. Here's what McClure had to say about liberal arts. For the practical task of defending civilization, we have need of liberal education. The training of youth in the mastery of ideas provides the understanding and the appreciation of values vital to our democratic way of life. Technicians with expert hand, keen eye, and sharpened faculties may win the battles, fill the barns, and launch the ships. But with these skills must go the human and enlightened heart. That's a little bit better than Merriam-Webster, isn't it? McClure believed that the education his students were about to receive, and you're about to receive, was not just about getting enough credits to graduate, or going through the motions in a broad range of subjects. Nor is it just about acquiring and perfecting skills that will help you in your chosen career as a writer, a business manager, a nurse, or any of the other professions that Westminster College prepares the students for. It's not about taking a sensible degree that you hope will lead to a well-paying career, either. In fact, liberal arts education goes well beyond this, sharpening critical and analytical abilities, testing existing and new ideas, and exploring the ideals behind democratic society. And never were these principles better encapsulated than when Winston Churchill spoke in Westminster's Gymnasium in March of 1946. Just a couple of hundred yards from where you're sitting now, the greatest Prime Minister in British wartime history stated that the merits of freedom, speech and religion and thought, trial by jury, and the other tenets that Britain and America rest upon will endure challenges such as the one communism that he spoke about. And then he explained how communism was a very real threat to their survival. When you walk across the campus, think about it for a moment. You're literally retracing the footsteps of Winston Churchill and, as I mentioned, Margaret Thatcher and Mikhail Gorbachev. I think that's a good enough reason for using Westminster on its own, really. Churchill had led Britain and the democratic West to victory over Hitler and the Axis powers in World War II, but quickly came crashing back down to earth. This was when, just a few weeks after VE Day, Victory in Europe Day, he was voted out of office. And this was not just a marginal election loss, it was a rout. Imagine that, your greatest defeat souring your greatest triumph. It's got to hurt, right? Many people would have given up, but then there weren't many Winston Churchills. One of the reasons was that Churchill was plunged into despair by this unexpected disaster of the ballot box, is that he had unfinished business with Russia and its formidable leader, Joseph Stalin. Churchill had reluctantly accepted Stalin as an ally when Hitler turned on Russia in that fateful summer of 1941. But he had despised communism from the beginning, calling it a pestilence. Churchill devoted his entire career to promoting freedom and liberty, and communism went against everything he stood for. But now out of office, he needed a platform to air his concerns about communism on the world stage. He could have picked Oxford, or Cambridge, or maybe Harvard. Certainly there were enough invitations. But it was a letter from Westminster President Bullitt McClure that instead grabbed his attention, not least due to the postscript added by President Harry Truman at the bottom of the letter. Winston, this is a wonderful school in my home state. Hope you can do it. I'll introduce you. And then he pushed the letter back across the White House desk to Mr. McClure and said, now you send that to him. And it worked. Churchill had never heard of this Westminster College or Fulton, Missouri, but he knew that speaking here with Harry Truman sitting beside him on the stage would ensure that the world was watching and, he hoped, listening. Shameless plug alert! In my book, I explore how Fulton got ready for Churchill and Truman's visit. I'm sure copies are available somewhere on campus. But for now, before I get booted off the stage, let's focus on what he said when he got here. Churchill warned that the Soviets had brought down an iron curtain across Europe, dividing it between the communist East and democratic West. He warned that communism was not content with this, but was spreading like that disease he had talked about back in 1918. He then called for a special relationship between Britain, the United States, and the English-speaking peoples to stop the spread of expansionist communism, and for active diplomacy backed by military strength to reach a settlement with the Soviets. Now, most people have heard of these terms, Iron Curtain and special relationship, and they're famous for good reason. Churchill accurately described the division of Europe, which became even more telling when embodied by the Berlin Wall. And he also did a fine job, if I must say so, of a countryman, in defining the partnership between Britain and the US. But it's the vision that these terms represent, and the courage that Churchill showed in bouncing back from his worst ever political defeat. Just to come here and speak, let alone what happened after he left Fulton. These are what most impressed me about the leadership of Winston Churchill and the principles of leadership that you will learn following in his footsteps in coming to Westminster. Churchill may have made a little bit too much for his gift of predicting the future, but he certainly did have a unique talent for telling how it was and predicting what was to come when he shared with the world all those famous words in 1946. But no matter how much praise his foresight might earn now, and how famous he was then as now, Churchill's speech was not well received, to put it mildly. Yes, he was a beloved war leader, but many people in Britain and the US still considered Russia to be an ally, and they wanted more than anything to avoid another war. Politicians on both sides of the Atlantic, despite Churchill titling the address The Sinews of Peace, and the main thrust obviously being peace, not war, accused Churchill of imperialism. Famous American columnist Walter Lippmann labeled the speech an almost catastrophic blunder, and Stalin himself called his old ally a warmonger. Many politicians would have apologized and backtracked and hidden behind focus groups and opinion polls. Flip-flopping, I think you call it. Not Winston Churchill. He was not one to flip-flop. Visiting New York shortly after he left Fulton, he faced hundreds of protesters chanting outside his hotel, "G.I. Joe is home to stay. Winnie, Winnie, go away." In typical fashion, Churchill stood his ground as he spoke that night. "I do not," he said, "wish to withdraw nor modify a single word." We can see the echo of these words and Churchill's leadership throughout the next 67 years, in the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine, in JFK's calm handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and in the partnership that defined the special relationship between Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, which helped end the Cold War. Now, whether you're going to be a history major or not, your liberal arts education here at Westminster will give you an understanding of Churchill and the great figures of the past, and the leadership principles they embodied, not only in the classroom, but also in the wonderful National Churchill Museum, the Leadership Institute, and the various other world-facing organizations here on campus. You'll learn more about your country and your world during the time here. At this great school college, as Harry Truman called it, you'll explore who you are, what you believe, and why, and how to articulate this with your pen, your keyboard, and, like Churchill, with your voice. No matter what career you pursue, or where you go on to live, these skills will serve you well. While at Westminster, you'll interact with the best ideas in philosophy, music, literature, and yes, even though I hated every moment of it and would not go through it again for any amount of money, college algebra. By studying what has gone before, you'll be able to interpret what is now and shape what is to come. Make the most of your opportunity, because not every student has the chance to go to a school like this. Work hard, get involved, pursue excellence. And then, when you walk back through these magnificent columns on graduation day, you won't just be another college grad. Instead, you'll be a capable young adult who is fully prepared for whatever you do in life, wherever life takes you, and whatever's next, as a true leader of tomorrow. Thank you.